So, Sister Alford, Vice Rector of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I have the opposite problem to Monsignor Galantino, who told us he couldn't speak English because it would be a disaster. On Tuesday, I was at this lovely meeting at Lo Piano, where everybody's preparing for this huge meeting in Assisi, the economy of Francesco, and there were all these amazingly active and wonderful young people preparing, and there was me, you know. And everybody there was Italian, and they're all full of life, but we all have to speak English because we've got this streaming going on with Australia and Poland and all these other countries, so everybody's talking in English. And so all these young people had to get up and say what they had to say, and I had to sort of speak towards the end. And I just had to say before I spoke, you know, I'm really sorry that I can't speak English with this beautiful Italian accent that everybody else has had this afternoon. It's so pedestrian, my English, in comparison. So. Anyhow, so building a common future through education and research. So I'm very glad to be here, very glad to be with the Foundation, also to be at the Catholic University. I mean, I came to Rome to work in a pontifical university. That was what I was sent to do. And I'm very happy there, and it's amazing what we can do there. But I'm very aware of the limitations we have as well. One of our former rectors said to me one time, "We're really a military college." and I think that's not bad analogy, really. We're sending out the troops, you know. And a place like the Catholic University in Milan is able to be a sort of other side of our soul. You know, we're very happy that there's a place like the Catholic University of Milan. Also the LUMSA as well, you know, but this place has a sort of cachet that even the LUMSA doesn't have. You know. Anyhow, so my title is Building a Common Future Through Education and Research. We've got two parts of this title, each with two parts. Building a common future. Okay, so we start off with this image of building something. And a common future. So the future's common, hopefully, maybe the building as well. And then the second half, through education and research. Now, this title, which was given to me, for someone like me who has an engineering background, should be perfect. You know, this is exactly what we do. We all want, this is our objective, common future. And this is the way we're going to get there, education and research. So we have our objective and we have our means for getting there. The only thing that's missing in the title, but of course you can't put everything in a title, is how do we know we succeeded? We've got there. So what's our indicators, you know? But it's a pretty good title for people who have an engineering background. But I want to say that I think a more effective way of thinking about this problem is that education and research are the common future. Education and research are the common future. It's not that we've got to build a common future through education and research, but that these very things are the common future. They are not just a means for getting there. They are the end. Well, or at least they're also the end. As I would also like to say that the work that goes on in business, the work of engineers and that is also the end. But we have to see it in a different way. It's not just a means towards an end. And so what I want to say is that I think the most important thing I can say today, because lots of other important things have been said, is that we need to adopt a mindset, I want to use that word mindset, that allows us to see, vedere, to see our work, our teaching, our research already as the way that can produce a different common future. And if we can do that, if we can see this already, then we can hope that such a future can emerge. I'm saying this remembering, you know, we're in a Catholic university, the foundation behind this meeting is Catholic Foundation. We can remember how our Lord was always going on about people not seeing. You know, he was healing, giving sight to the blind, and he was complaining about the blind guides that the people had. So this thing about being able to see something which maybe isn't so obvious on the surface, but which is actually already there. It's already there. I think is quite important for us. We know that the future in itself, talk about building a common future, the future in itself isn't predictable. Yes, we have these very important people called futurologists. We have people talking about the big trends of the future. You know, I have a friend, she's a former big accountant with KPMG. Now she runs her own consultancy, which means that she goes to these board meetings and talks about the mega trends of the next 20 or 50 or 100 years. You know, and she tells me, you know, I go to these meetings, I say all these amazing things to all these very important people, and at the end of it, the outcome is, well, thank you very much, you know. And that's the end of it, you know. So we can know these things, we know there are these trends going on, but we haven't a clue what to do about them, you know. What do we do? So it's useful to know about them. It's not a waste of time, but we can't really see what that means the future is going to be. Perhaps the nearest we can get to thinking about the future is through our imagination, through storytelling, through fiction, film, literature, these kinds of things. Not a surprise that a lot of modern film production is about that. I just recently read in Financial Times that the sector of filmmaking now that is getting the biggest investment from Netflix, from the major film studios, and all this kind of thing is sci-fi and fantasy. And I asked my nephew, who's just finished his first degree in English, I said, why is that happening? He said, oh, it's obvious, he said, but because that's where you can talk about religion. It's the only place where you can talk about religion in film now. And he thought I was a bit stupid to ask him the question, but, you know, all nephews think their aunties are stupid, you know, but anyway. So films like Matrix, I don't know if you know these films, I know them a little bit, Matrix, Blade Runner, these series now, Netflix, like Westworld, where you have the robots and the people interacting with each other and you hardly can tell the difference between them. They all imagine a future for us in a way that we can't do using the trends and that kind of thing. But they often seem to be very pessimistic futures. You know, they emphasize what will happen as a result of our inability to relate to each other, or what's going to happen to us as a result of our conflicts, destroying our world, change the sort of road that we're taking, which is going towards doom if we don't change it, kind of thing. You know. Anyway, I think rather than seeing these sorts of projections of the future, useful as they are, as a real starting point for us, much more interesting and more productive would be to see something like the medieval monasteries or the reducciones in the New World, or the social enterprises of today as ways of already seeing, of acting and being a source of a common future that is generative and life-giving, rather than full of the destruction and dysfunction that we find in the Matrix or other futuristic films. So anyway, with that little introduction, I'd like to make 3 points, and not to go over 15 minutes if possible, because I'm, you know, one of those awful Anglo-Saxons from the north, and we try to keep our time. So what is the mindset that we need? Just to say one thing about that, because that's, of course, a big issue. Number 2 is promoting the mindset. These things are like little dolls, these little Russian dolls. You know, what the core idea is, what's the key thing about the mindset we need? Then the next thing is, how do we promote the mindset? And so that's talking about the university today, and especially the Catholic university. And then the third thing is just Christianity and Catholicism in the world, its role in the world today. So that's the biggest part of us. So those 3 points, building out from the core one, which is the one about the mindset. Now, we could start in a lot of different ways. I think instead of talking about mindset in the abstract, the most useful way, especially because we're here a group of sort of business people and academics together, is to start from what is dominant in our current mindset, some of which was discussed in the closed meeting which unfortunately I couldn't participate in. We had a health emergency in our university, so I could only come for this afternoon, which I'm sorry about that. But so what is the dominant current mindset that we have, and how could we modify it so that we can move more towards, or at least create the presupposition for the situation that Laudato Si proposes to us, the common future that Laudato Si proposes to us? Well, I think if we want to say one thing that really characterizes the current dominant view in academy and in business world, it's the person as an individual. You know, individualism is still very, very powerful idea. All our politics is about adjudicating conflicting interests between us and about stopping us from using more violent means than that to get our way. You know, economics is about market transactions between otherwise disconnected individuals, and so on and so on. Not all subjects, maybe law has a little bit more, because of its medieval foundations, a little bit more independent from that, but all sciences that really get their identity after 1750, so most of the modern social sciences have really absorbed this individualism. Very, very strong way. It's a very, very powerful idea still in our societies. So we need then, I think, to find a mindset which builds on the benefits of individualism. We don't just want to demonize it. You know, if we think about parts of the world that haven't been through the sort of enlightenment process that we've been through in the West, let's think about the Middle East, or think about India, perhaps, and think about the problems that they have. They have the sort of traditional cultures that we also had in the West before this process. And what do they suffer from? Well, things like nepotism, things like corruption, a total lack of meritocracy. People are in positions because they're related to certain other people and not because they're any good, really, at those jobs, that kind of thing. So on the other way around, we have the benefit from this experience of individualism, of course, an emphasis on human freedom, which is, you know, a bit ambiguous, but basically positive, and an emphasis on meritocracy and on just procedure, you know, everybody being treated fairly, which is a pretty important thing that we want to welcome from a Christian point of view, I think, and ultimately does come out of Christianity, we could say. But apart from this, you know, these good things that we can recognize in individualism, we can also see its very, very profound problem, which is this isolationism, the situation of everyone being an isolated individual that is carrying us towards. You may not know, but in Britain now, we have a minister for loneliness. Because the healthcare issues, the educational issues, the breakdown of the family, that everybody realizes these are fundamental things which are costing a lot to our society. Because when you start to find the financial aspect of it, everybody starts to treat it seriously. You know, but it has big healthcare costs, big social care costs, and so on. So we have this huge lack on the side of how do we envisage our connectedness, our need to relate to other people. Individualism gives us no capacity intellectually to do that. You know, the only way you can think about somebody else's good within individualism is to be altruistic, as the enlightened philosopher would say. What does that mean? You put your own objectives on one side and you think about the other person's. Because there's no way for you to have a relationship in which you can share your objectives. You know? And of course, if you think about altruism in that sense, especially a business, but most of us, for most of our times, most of our lives, we cannot be altruistic. We cannot be putting other people's goals always before our own. We have to think about ourselves. So it's not a very effective way of trying to think about connectedness. So what can we do about this? Well, you know, I've been thinking about this for a long time and working a lot with people in business who I think are very, very open to this idea. I think it's the part of the social system today that is the most open to trying to think about new ideas in this area. And I think the most illuminating way forward that we've found which works a lot with a lot of these business people. I'm working with a group called Blueprint for Better Business in UK, is to take the personalism of Jacques Maritain and use this as the starting point. In Maritain's understanding of the human being, there's a distinction between, as well as a unity of, two dimensions. One dimension is the individual. We'll come back to say a bit more about that, allowing us to keep on board what we have from the Enlightenment traditions, which we're inheriting. And the other is personal or relational. Now, if we think about it, we're used to thinking about the human person in two dimensions. You know, we talk about body and soul. I mean, not just Christians, people in general. Body and soul, matter and spirit. You know, we recognize there's more than one dimension to human life. But the thing that's really crucial about the personalism is that it takes the non-material dimension, the non-individuated dimension, and says it's intrinsically relational. This is very, very important for this sort of step forward in the mindset. What does intrinsically relational mean? It means that we relate to others on our spiritual level as part of who we are. You know, that other human beings are not just useful to me in gaining what I need as an individual, my survival needs or my social hierarchic needs or these kinds of things. But they are part of who I am. I need them to be who I am. So we can recognize that we have these two dimensions at the same time, which seem a bit contradictory to each other, but actually are there. On the one side, we have this individuated nature, which is, we have bodies, you know, we're fixed in time and space. We need food, we need clothing. We also need to know where we are in the hierarchies as well, where we are in the social groups, that kind of thing. So things like league tables and that are also parts of this individual identity. If I'm at the top of the level, somebody else isn't. I'm pushing somebody else out, you know. So these are all to do with individual goals and individual objectives. And we need to take that seriously. And the fact that economics and politics up to now has only taken that seriously is a sort of reductionist view, but it works up to a point. It's not completely wrong, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough for what we need now. But so for personalism, to recognize our individuated nature, the fact that we have individual objectives, which mean I relate to somebody else insofar as they can give me what I need. That's the contractual model of relating. You know, Eutimio has a house, I want a house. I have money, he wants money, we have a contract, he gets the money, I get the house. Apart from that, I'm not interested in Eutimio. He's helped me get what I want. Well, I'm sorry about that, Eutimio, it's not true. But anyway, but that works up to a point. It's not wrong, it's just very, very reductionist and limited, and it's misleading, because actually a lot more is going on in our relationship. So Maritain would say, okay, that's happening, but it's only half the story. It might not even be half. It's not the full story, anyway. Because equally important in our relating to others is this personal side, this spiritual, non-material side, which is always part of our life. This is the difficult thing for us. We are individual and relational at the same time in every circumstance of our life. So we're not the sort of intrinsically relational when we're in church or when we're with our families or when we're with the people that we really care about. We're that as well when we're at the business, on the shop floor and in the boardroom, and similarly when we're in families, we're also trying to get individual needs out of our relationships with others, and in church, you know. Let's not get on that subject. Anyway, we have both of these kinds of ways of relating to other people. I need things, but also I can only find my good in relation with others. That is going on at the same time. Now, if you can see that, we can explain a lot of the research that we find, talking about education research, in modern social disciplines. For instance, the most classic example is the happiness research, which we can't really explain unless we can understand that relationships are intrinsically important to human beings. You know, I was just at a meeting a few weeks ago with John Helliwell, who's the key person behind all the World Happiness Reports, and he said, look, if we have to say one thing that's come out of all these reports over all the years, it's that relationships are the most important thing for happiness. If you don't take anything else away from those reports, that's the thing to take away. You know, so this is just, we're trying to come up with a theory now which just is relating to these empirical results that we're getting. We're not trying to say, look, you should look at this like this because it's the Christian way to do it, and that, even if it is the Christian way to do it. But it's really hitting us, both in terms of the problems we have to deal with now, all of which are social and systemic, and in terms of the results that we're getting from empirical research. So that's our first thing. The key thing about the mindset, and there's a lot of other things to say, is we need to recover a relational view of the human person without saying the individual is to be gone. You know, it's bad. No, it's okay, but it's just not good enough. It's not big enough. It's too limited a view of the human person. We need to add this other dimension, recognize this other dimension, relational dimension. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, the university as the means of promoting this different mindset. Well, the university as an institution obviously has roots that go way back in time, way before the rise of individualism as we know it today, but it's still very influenced by modern individualism. And necessarily as a social endeavor, the university is social or isn't anything. It does not find itself in a very happy situation in a world dominated by individualism. It's become more and more complex to understand what a university is in this environment. I mean, certainly in UK, universities have become more and more and more like businesses because they don't really know how else to be anything else, really. Okay, it's not completely wrong, it's not completely bad, but it's got a lot of drawbacks to it, you know. Let's think about the very word university. It comes from those Latin words uni vertere, the idea of everything converging on something, coming, everything vertendo towards something, the uni. The trouble is we don't know what the uni is now. We can do the vertere bit, but what's the uni that's holding everything together? Within the world in which the universities were born, it was the kind of Christian worldview. You know, we could say, or theology. When we had very strong nation states, the national identity took the place of it. You know, the universities could run their disciplines and they could be diverse, and they were all working towards promoting a certain culture, a certain identity. But who in a university today thinks they're promoting a national identity or a national culture? You know, I mean, not many people in university think that now. And furthermore, national identity can't even hold nations themselves together anymore, as this terrible Brexit saga that's been going on, you know, gradually grinding to its final conclusion today. I'm just about to lose my European citizenship at midnight tonight. Great sorrow. You know, it can't even hold a nation like Britain together anymore. One of the most classic nationalistic places on earth, you know. So in this kind of vacuum, I would say the Catholic universities, with a very open sort of Catholic identity, could start to play a very significant role. You know, a lot of thinking has been done about what it means to be a Catholic university since John Paul II's, at least since John Paul II's apostolic exhortation, Ex Corde Ecclesiae, and now that's complemented a bit by the thinking of Pope Francis in Veritatis Gaudium, which refers to the ecclesiastical universities. Where I come from, people want to make a big distinction between ecclesiastical universities and Catholic universities, even though I don't think it's so very significant, but I didn't say that, okay, if you talk to anybody from Pontifical University. Now, I think these debates about what Catholic the identity of a Catholic university is, at least in the Anglo-Saxon world, have focused a lot on how do we pass on a Christian faith through all our disciplines. And there's been a big argument about the mandatum for theologians. You know, how close should theologians be to the magisterium of the church or not? Huge amount of energy has been spent on that. But I think in the light of what we're saying here today, an equally important part of this Catholic identity, if we can put it like that, is handing on this sort of personalist mindset, this new way of trying to draw together the disciplines